Good morning, everybody. Between the end of the Napoleonic Wars in 1815 and the beginning of World War I in 1914, there was only one major war between European powers, and that was in the area of the Black Sea, the Crimean Peninsula, which is why it's called the Crimean War. And it was this war that introduced the world to Florence Nightingale. And this is a little bit of her story. Russia is quite northern, and its big seacoast and the Arctic is frozen a lot of the time. So a historic Russian foreign policy goal was a warm water port, and they often focused on the Black Sea, which led them into historical tension with Turkey, who also borders the Black Sea. That's part of the background to the Crimean War. The initial cause of the war was a dispute over who could supervise the Holy Land sites. The Turks, who were Muslims, had a deal with the French Catholics to do it, but the Russian Orthodox also wanted to get involved. And that led to some more tension. And there were also land disputes, and eventually Turkey declared war on Russia. The Allies, who feared Russian expansion in the region, the British and the French especially, sent troops to the Black Sea area, and eventually they went up to the Crimean Peninsula where they besieged the Russian port. They had a series of battles, and it was a mess. Now, this photograph of soldiers of the Crimean War reminds us that the look and feel was like our Civil War, which was only a few years later. Now, Florence Nightingale was born here. She was in what we'd say a middle-class family. Nursing was not what her parents wanted for her, but she persevered, and through people she knew was able to get over to Constantinople, Istanbul today, where the hospital conditions for the Crimean War wounded were terrible. Crowded, dirty, filthy, etc., etc. So one of Florence Nightingale's ideas was to keep things really clean and to try to separate the patients a bit. And this became her trademark. She asked for a prefabricated hospital to be built in England in parts and then shipped over to Constantinople where it was assembled. And that happened, and here's a picture of it. So she could really put into practice her ideas of cleanliness, keeping things clean, and spacing out the patients a little bit. She would often walk around at night with a lamp, and she was described as the lady with the lamp in the London Times, and that's why the lamp is associated with her. Now, some things were used in the Crimean War that were used in our Civil War. For instance, the camera. The Crimean War was one of the first highly photographed wars. The railroad was also used to move men and material, and this was, of course, part of our Civil War a few years later. And the telegraph was used to communicate between the armies and the generals and the leaders, and this was also a big deal during our Civil War. So the Crimean War was sort of a run-up to our Civil War in some ways. And during our Civil War, the North asked Florence Nightingale to advise on nursing, and the North set up the Sanitary Commission based on her recommendations. Well, the Crimean War ended after 3 years. This is the painting of the charge of the Light Brigade. I think most people who study the Crimean War see it as just folly, partly because there was a ton of incompetence. Florence Nightingale went back to England. She wrote her book on nursing and kept stressing the theme of cleanliness and separating the patients a bit. She was awarded the Order of Merit, which was kind of like the Medal of Honor, but for civilians. She was the first woman to get this. And when she died, her family was offered a place for her in Westminster Abbey, but they declined, and she was buried in a simple grave in a small churchyard. So today, when you see lamps associated with nursing, that's one of the legacies of Florence Nightingale. But perhaps her greatest legacy is this emphasis on cleanliness and how important this is in the medical field. So we thank Florence for that emphasis, and we still use it today.